Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Dianna D'Aiello. Dianna D'Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father was in the military, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Dianna met Kevin Green. When Dianna was harassed by several men at a bar, Kevin intervened and chased the men away. In gratitude, Dianna bought Kevin a drink. They went on a date a few days later, and their relationship quickly progressed. Kevin was in the process of divorcing his first wife. Kevin and Dianna moved in together for a while, and Dianna became pregnant. After Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married. While waiting for their daughter to be born, they rented an apartment in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Dianna stayed home to prepare for the baby's arrival, having previously worked with her mother in a garment factory. By late September 1979, Dianna was nearly 9 months pregnant. On the evening of September 30th, Kevin and Dianna got into an argument after watching a movie together. The impending birth of their daughter had put a strain on their relationship. To calm down and avoid escalating the situation, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby restaurant. About 40 minutes after the incident, Kevin called the local police department to report that his wife, Dianna, had been shot and needed immediate medical attention. Police arrived on the scene shortly after receiving the call. When they entered the apartment, they found Dianna lying on the bed, covered in blood, with a head wound that appeared to be a gunshot wound. However, upon closer examination, paramedics later determined that the wound was actually caused by blunt force trauma. When the police checked on Dianna, found her alive and provided first aid until the ambulance arrived, they asked Kevin to leave the room. After the paramedics took over, they carefully transported Dianna to the hospital. Meanwhile, the police asked Kevin to stay behind to give a statement. He told police that he and his wife had been arguing, so he decided to leave the apartment to calm down and buy some burgers at a fast food restaurant. In his haste, he realized he had left his keys inside, but chose not to go back to get them. Instead, he locked the door and went to his car. As Kevin drove away from the apartment complex, he noticed a truck with its back door open, and an African-American man walking back and forth toward the truck. It was late, around 2 a.m. He drove to the fast food restaurant he frequented, but it was busy, so he went to another location a few miles away. After buying a burger, he drove home, which took 40 minutes. When he arrived, he found the front door wide open. He rushed inside and found his wife, Dianna, covered in blood. He immediately called the police. Kevin's story had some suspicious signs, but when the police checked the fast food bag, they found the food was still warm and the receipt confirmed the time and place of purchase, supporting Kevin's story. As a result, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but not before asking him to provide a blood sample for further investigation. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts could still compare the blood found at the crime scene with Kevin's blood type. When Dianna arrived at the hospital, doctors determined that her head wound was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it was likely inflicted by a small, heavy object. Unfortunately, Dianna fell into a coma. The medical team worked diligently for several hours to save both her and her unborn child. After many hours of intense care, they were able to stabilize Dianna's condition, but she still required surgery. During the investigation, police asked medical experts to determine whether Dianna had been sexually assaulted. The experts confirmed that Dianna had indeed been sexually assaulted, finding semen on her body. However, Kevin testified that he and Dianna had had sex just hours before the argument. Dianna and Kevin's family stayed in the hospital all night. And the next morning, the baby's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. Doctors tried, but the baby did not survive. Although Dianna remained in a coma, her chances of survival had improved. However, doctors warned that she could suffer long-term effects. Although Kevin had an alibi, police were not quick to clear him due to several inconsistencies in his story. He had an argument with Dianna just hours before the attack, left his front door unlocked, and spent much of the time on a quick trip to a fast food restaurant. His claim of seeing a suspicious person near his home at night also raised suspicions. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Kevin to the crime. Police are investigating another suspect in a series of similar crimes in the area. A year earlier, a series of break-ins and assaults had occurred in Tustin and surrounding areas with similar modus operandi. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was killed after being beaten with a piece of wood and sexually assaulted. 4 months later, a 21-year-old woman was murdered and sexually assaulted. In July 1979, a woman was attacked in her apartment but survived, although she was in a coma for several weeks. Her testimony provided no new leads. Prior to Dianna's attack, a similar attack occurred in September 1979, when a 34-year-old woman was murdered. A series of crimes occurred, all with striking similarities to the attack on Dianna. The police believed they were dealing with a serial killer and focused their efforts on capturing him. To address the growing concern, the police decided to issue a public warning through the media, specifically targeting women living alone and those living in low-rise apartments, who appeared to be the serial killer's favorite targets. The warning caused panic, and in response, the police increased night patrols in the area. The police began by interviewing and soon received their first leads. Several of the victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their home. Although the description was somewhat vague, the police were able to identify several men who matched and investigate them. Unfortunately, these leads did not lead to any cases. A week after Dianna was attacked, her doctors informed her loved ones that she had finally regained consciousness. However, there was a serious concern: Dianna was unable to speak or remember anything. According to her doctors, her brain was still recovering. Around the same time, another attack occurred in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, striking her multiple times with a piece of wood and sexually assaulting her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police were once again unable to catch the perpetrator. Dianna spent several days in the hospital, recovering from her injuries. During this time, her mind slowly cleared, but she had lost almost all of her memory. Doctors told her family that her memories might return, but warned them not to remind her of anything, letting her remember on her own. After being stabilized, Dianna was discharged from the hospital and her family took her home. Her husband Kevin had to work at the military base, so Dianna was sent to live with Dianna's parents. 2 weeks later, another attack occurred in the city, similar to the one on Dianna. This time, the attacker killed a 17-year-old girl. Dianna began attending physical therapy sessions and her condition gradually improved. Although she still could not speak or remember the attack, a breakthrough occurred 6 weeks later during a therapy session. The doctor asked Dianna if she could remember who attacked her. To the doctor's surprise, Dianna suddenly pointed to her wedding ring. The doctor shared this information with Dianna's mother when she came to pick her up. Dianna's mother asked her daughter if her husband, Kevin, was the one who attacked her, and Dianna nodded. Dianna's mother immediately took her to the police station to speak with the chief. After asking Dianna a few more questions, the police confirmed that she remembered her attacker and identified him as her husband, Kevin. This new information dramatically changed the course of the investigation. Police suspected that Dianna's attack was related to a series of similar incidents in the area, committed by a serial offender. However, Kevin matched the suspect's description, leading police to question whether Kevin could be the culprit behind these attacks. The police asked Dianna and her mother to pretend that Dianna had not recovered her memory and to return home with Kevin. but they agreed to do so. Meanwhile, the police kept a close watch on Kevin, monitoring his every move in the hope of finding evidence of a crime linked to the serial murders. Crime scene testing revealed evidence under Dianna's fingernails, where they found bloody skin particles, in addition to the attacker's semen. After analyzing the evidence, police found a match between the attacker's blood type and Kevin's blood sample, indicating that Kevin was the one who attacked Dianna. As for a motive, police suspect that Dianna's refusal to have sex with Kevin may have prompted the attack. Although Kevin insists that they had sex earlier that night. The police spoke to Dianna, and she remembered the attack clearly, confirming that Kevin was her killer. During the conversation, her mother expressed that they could no longer live with Kevin, and the police decided to arrest him. To protect Dianna's family, Kevin was arrested at a store instead of at their home. Despite his arrest, Kevin maintained his innocence. Preparations for the trial lasted 10 months, during which time Dianna's health gradually improved. She regained her ability to speak. Dianna was cleared of the charges, and her husband was found guilty of assaulting her. Kevin's defense team tried to use his fast food alibi, but it was not enough to disprove Dianna's testimony. As a result, Kevin was convicted in November 1980 of the child's murder and assault on Dianna. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Police learned that 2 similar crimes had occurred in their district before Kevin was arrested, but both victims survived. Although the identity of the attacker remains unknown, these incidents raised suspicions that Kevin was involved in other crimes. The attacks stopped abruptly after Kevin was arrested. After Kevin's sentencing, Dianna promptly filed for divorce, which Kevin did not contest. Dianna then focused on her recovery. When Kevin became eligible for parole, the committee denied his request, a decision that was repeated 3 more times. The serial killer case remained unsolved until 1996, when police reopened the investigation. Semen samples from the victims, which had been stored in a laboratory, were retested. Police wanted to determine who the culprit was, and DNA analysis yielded a surprising result. Gerald Parker, a man arrested the same year as Kevin, was found to have a DNA match to the serial murders. After the DNA match confirmed Parker's involvement in the serial murders, investigators re-examined the attack on Dianna. Parker and Kevin worked together on a military base, and Parker owned a dark-colored van, similar to the one described in the attacks. During his initial police interview, Kevin reported seeing an African-American man near a dark-colored truck in front of their home on the day of the attack. This information led police to consider the possibility that Parker was involved in the attack on Dianna. While Kevin was in jail, the local prosecutor updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher serial murder investigation. The prosecutor asked Kevin to provide a DNA sample, which he quickly agreed to. While the DNA analysis was underway, police visited Parker in prison to discuss the case. Although they had not yet formally charged him with the attacks, they hoped to gather more information. Parker initially denied any involvement in the crimes, so detectives focused their questioning on the attack on Dianna. During questioning, Parker revealed that on the night of the incident, he drove his truck to Kevin's house, intending to circle the neighborhood, looking through the ground floor windows for a victim. However, this time, he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Dianna's apartment, and when Kevin left the house, Parker noticed that the door was unlocked, so he waited a few minutes before entering the apartment and attacking Dianna. Parker revealed that he did not know Kevin's wife because they worked in different areas of the military base. He also confessed to committing 6 murders and 3 non-fatal attacks. After Parker's confessions, DNA evidence confirmed his guilt and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor quickly moved to overturn Kevin's sentence, and he was released from prison after 16 years. The case has caused widespread outrage, not only because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison, but also because it took so long for police to identify the real killer. When Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in compensation, a relatively small amount. Years later, he received an additional $100 for each day he spent in prison, totaling $620,000. Despite Kevin's exoneration, his wife Dianna initially refused to believe he was innocent. She had previously claimed that Kevin was her only attacker. However, after DNA evidence from her body matched Parker's, she changed her story. Dianna reported that Kevin attacked her before leaving the apartment, and then Parker entered and attacked her as well. However, Parker said that when he entered the house, Dianna was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress. He also admitted to hitting her on the head. Dianna's family proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that Kevin might have conspired with Parker to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker denied knowing Kevin, pointing out that the military base was large and many people didn't know each other personally. Parker denied knowing Kevin. Kevin also denied any involvement with Parker, insisting that he would never harm Dianna or their unborn daughter. He explained that he left the door open because he didn't want to go back to get the keys after their argument. And he still blames himself for that decision. As for Parker, he was sentenced to death in 1999, but this sentence has yet to be carried out. After years of waiting on death row, California imposed a moratorium on executions, and as a result, Parker remains incarcerated to this day. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carol Maltesi. Carol Nicole Maltesi was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy, to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, he never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally break up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos, although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed. The skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte, but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the end of March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agnieszka Klavina. Agnieszka Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She was the younger of two daughters, with her sister Greta being only a couple of years older. As a result, the two sisters were extremely close and friendly. Their parents made every effort to provide their daughters with a good education and support their dreams. Agnieszka developed into a sociable, cheerful, and active individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and had many friends. Her future aspirations involved a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved traveling and organizing leisure activities. With her striking appearance and impressive physique, Agnieszka consistently received attention and compliments from men. From a young age, Agnieszka had numerous admirers vying for her attention. Following her graduation from school, she worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying tourism management. At the age of 20, Agnieszka relocated from Latvia to the United Kingdom, settling in London. She believed that this move would provide her with greater opportunities to unlock her full potential and showcase her talents. Parents and an older sister were supportive of her decision. After the move, Agnieszka met Michael Mills, an older man with a good education and a thriving business. He owned a small movie theater and entertainment complex, and was considered successful. Agnieszka and Michael quickly hit it off and began dating. Michael showered Agnieszka with expensive gifts, and they traveled together, making plans for their future. They were truly in love and happy, and it seemed like a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to those close to Agnieszka, this was her first true love. She glowed when she was with Michael and dreamed of becoming his wife. In 2014, Agnieszka was offered a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. Although this meant a temporary move, Agnieszka didn't want to pass up the opportunity. Michael couldn't leave his job to go with her, but he didn't oppose her signing the contract. For Agnieszka, it was a chance to gain experience and potentially develop her career in a new field. Marbella is a renowned and appealing resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracting vacationers from worldwide, particularly affluent individuals seeking entertainment and luxury. It's a popular spot for celebrities, athletes, and business moguls. Agnieszka, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news about her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael after returning to England, which delighted her parents and sister. In late May 2014, Agnieszka moved to Spain with only the essentials, leaving her lover Michael in London. Despite the distance, they maintained daily communication through phone calls and video chats, keeping each other updated on their lives. Agnieszka Klavina was active on social media, where she shared daily updates about her life through photos, videos, and stories. As a result, she gained a large following of people who were interested in her activities and work. Her posts made it clear that she lived a busy, exciting life and made the most of every day. When her employment contract ended, Agnieszka decided to extend her stay in Spain for a few more months. It was the start of the peak tourist season in the resort town, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. After discussing her plans with her boyfriend, he gave her his support and promised to visit her for a few days. They had been apart for a long time and were eager to see each other. Agnes quickly found a new job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her apartment lease. In September, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her as planned. They spent their time together having fun, making plans for their upcoming wedding, and researching honeymoon destinations. However, their time together was short-lived, as Michael returned to London less than a week later. Agnes was left to work in Spain for another month, after which she intended to visit her relatives in Latvia and then join Michael in England. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went to the Costa del Sol nightclub with her friends. She had told her fiancé about her plans earlier, and he didn't object. At the club, they took pictures and had a good time, with Agnes posting some photos online that night. People who saw her that night remember Agnes wearing a short dress and carrying a small white handbag. As the night ended, Agnes told her friends she wanted to stay a bit longer and would take a taxi home. Her friends weren't worried because Agnes was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. As her friends left, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail. He seemed to be trying to win her over. After that, Agnes disappeared. Despite being in a crowded nightclub, no one saw her leave or knows where she went. The day after Agnes went missing, she failed to show up at work and her phone was turned off. Concerned colleagues and friends alerted the authorities, but the police were slow to act on their missing persons report. As the evening drew in, Michael, Agnes's worried fiancé, contacted her mother, explaining that he had been unable to reach Agnes all day, which was unprecedented. The following day, Agnes's parents and fiancé attempted to file a missing persons report with the Spanish police. However, they were informed that the report would only be considered if it was made in person. Consequently, Agnes's family and Michael flew to Marbella and filed the report 5 days after her disappearance. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment. The property appeared as if Agnes had simply stepped out for a short time, with her belongings, including documents, money, and valuable jewelry, still intact. The fridge was stocked with prepared food, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night out. It was clear that Agnes had not returned to her apartment since leaving with her friends. Agnes's phone was switched off, and she stopped posting on social media. She also wasn't responding to any messages. At this point, the police started investigating her disappearance, but a significant amount of time had already passed. Her friends and family created flyers with her picture and distributed them across the city, asking for help in finding her. The media soon picked up the story, and Agnes's disappearance was featured on TV news and the front pages of local newspapers. The investigation advanced after police analyzed CCTV footage from inside and outside the entertainment venue. Although the files had been deleted, specialists were able to recover them. A parking lot exit camera recording showed Agnes being led out of the club around 6 a.m. by a man, apparently against her will. A closer examination of this footage, the last to show Agnes alive, revealed more disturbing details. A man of large build was leading Agnes, gripping her tightly around the waist. Agnes appeared frightened, attempting to break free several times and speaking emotionally. Despite her struggles, the man persisted, eventually forcing her into a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows in the parking lot. At the moment the large man pushed Agnes into the cabin, another man was already inside, while the first man went to the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the door and tried to escape, but the doorman, standing next to her, intervened. The driver gestured and spoke, and the doorman pushed Agnes back into the car. The driver then handed the doorman something, likely a cash reward. About 6 minutes after Agnes entered the car, her phone was turned off and never turned back on. The vehicle's movement couldn't be tracked due to a lack of CCTV cameras. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last to contact Agnes. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the start, with investigators signing non-disclosure agreements and information withheld from the press and Agnieszka's loved ones. 6 months after the incident, Agnieszka's relatives were shown footage from the club's cameras, which revealed the identities of the 3 men who had last been in contact with Agnieszka. The large man who forcibly removed her from the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy and influential British millionaire. Also in the car were Craig Porter, a longtime friend of Capper's with no fixed occupation and a history of police attention, and Sean Usman, a dark-skinned doorman. During interrogation, Porter and Usman both claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnieszka had entered the car voluntarily. Capper's account was that he and a friend had spotted Agnieszka, a beautiful blonde, at the club and approached her to strike up a conversation. According to Capper, Agnieszka was already intoxicated, which contradicts the testimony of her friends. However, when offered a drink, she did not refuse. Capper then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, and Agnieszka allegedly agreed. Agnieszka reportedly changed her mind about attending a private party at Wesley's house while already in the car. She asked to be dropped off on a dark stretch of road, saying she would take a taxi home. According to the driver, he dropped her off at the requested location, which had no streetlights or CCTV cameras. However, Craig Porter, another passenger, couldn't confirm or deny this account because he was also heavily intoxicated and didn't recall when Agnieszka was in the car. Craig claimed he fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and didn't notice Agnieszka's departure. Sean Usman, the doorman, stated that Agnieszka was drunk but couldn't say if she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car stopped, the blonde woman opened the door and almost fell out. Then, at the driver's request, the doorman slammed the car door shut, burning a substantial tip. When questioned, Usman said he didn't believe Agnieszka was trying to escape by jumping out of the car while it was moving. He thought she might have accidentally opened the door due to intoxication. He also mentioned that Agnieszka didn't scream or ask for help. However, footage showed Wesley Capper firmly holding Agnieszka by the waist and wrist, leading her to the car. Wesley claimed Agnieszka was dizzy, and he was supporting her to prevent her from falling. Later, investigators discovered another suspicious video taken at Soto Grande in southern Spain's Puerta de la Duquesa port. The video, dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnieszka's disappearance, showed Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding John Capper's luxury yacht. They were carrying a large, heavy-looking suitcase and a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to Puerta de la Duquesa port a few days later, they had no luggage. After watching the footage, Capper claimed that he and his friends sailed to Ibiza for fun. According to him, the suitcase contained their belongings, and what investigators thought was a carpet was actually bedding. However, he couldn't explain what happened to it afterward. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and car yielded nothing, as both had been thoroughly cleaned and dry cleaned, eliminating any DNA evidence. Although a long blonde hair was found in a car's trunk, its origin couldn't be determined because the crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution revealed another peculiar detail. A few hours after Agnieszka was in the defendant's car, Capper made multiple calls to emergency services but hung up each time without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or unsure of his actions. Capper explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The Clavin family's lawyer believed Agnieszka had been dead for some time, with her body likely on the seabed in the suitcase brought onto the yacht by the suspects. He also thought the case was intentionally delayed, allowing the suspects to eliminate any incriminating evidence. A year and a half after Agnieszka vanished, Capper, Porter, and Usman were in court, accused of holding her against her will and forcing her into a car. However, due to insufficient evidence, no additional charges could be brought. They were granted bail and discreetly left the courtroom. Agnieszka's family was understandably outraged, but the judge stood firm. It wasn't until 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnieszka's disappearance, that the three men were retried. They maintained their innocence, claiming Agnieszka had entered the car voluntarily. The prosecutor requested that the doorman, Tustin, be considered an accomplice to the crime because he assisted the defendants in driving the victim, Agnieszka, away from the scene. This charge carried a potential 5-year prison sentence for Tustin. In his defense, Tustin delivered a passionate speech, claiming he was being targeted due to his skin color and inability to afford a good lawyer, as he sent all his earnings to support his impoverished family in Africa. In contrast, the lawyers for Kapper and Porter argued that their clients were only guilty of convincing Agnieszka to get into the car, not of forcing her to do so. According to their version of events, Agnieszka was dropped off on the road at her request and was waiting for a cab to go home. They suggested that, while intoxicated and unable to defend herself, Agnieszka might have been kidnapped and killed by someone else. The judge's verdict shocked and outraged the family of the missing young woman because none of the defendants received significant punishment. Tustin was acquitted of all charges, while Kapper received a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnieszka's intoxication to persuade her to get into his car. Porter was sentenced to 6 months for his role in the incident. However, both men received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnieszka's family a compensation of 101,000 sterling, which was seen as a paltry sum. Agnieszka's family was disappointed with the outcome and appealed the decision. It was later revealed that both defendants had broken the law again while awaiting the court's decision. Kapper, who was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, hit and killed a woman with his car and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also intoxicated, stole a car after assaulting its owner. Despite the severity of these new crimes, Kapper was only sentenced to probation thanks to his lawyer's effective defense. He paid a substantial amount in compensation to the family of the woman he killed but remained free. Porter was less fortunate this time and did go to jail. In 2021, nearly 7 years after Agnieszka's disappearance, the main suspect faced punishment. Wesley had spent years living a self-destructive lifestyle, excessively consuming alcohol and illicit substances, which severely impacted his health. He was hospitalized and, after seeming to recover, suddenly suffered a stroke. Kapper passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. Around this time, Agnieszka's parents submitted another appeal to the court. However, since the suspect was now deceased, prosecution was no longer possible. Despite the Supreme Court's pending decision in this complex case, an unexpected development occurred 9 years later. Although Agnieszka's body was never found, she was presumed dead. Later, her family, including her parents, sister, and fiancé, accepted their lawyer's theory that the perpetrators had disposed of Agnieszka's body in a suitcase, which was then loaded onto a yacht and discarded at sea, making it impossible to recover. Nevertheless, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnieszka vanished, the case took a surprising turn. In mid-June, a gardener at the elite Lida Golf Club in Costa del Sol discovered a mysterious object while cleaning near the coast. Upon closer inspection, it was an old, damaged suitcase. The gardener did not open it and instead called the police. Authorities found human remains inside the suitcase, later identified as belonging to a young woman aged 25 to 35 at the time of death. Further investigation revealed that the suitcase had been in the water for around 10 years before washing the shore. Based on this information, police suspected that the remains might belong to Agnieszka, who went missing 9 years ago. To confirm this, experts are currently conducting DNA tests to compare Agnieszka's DNA with the remains found. The investigation is ongoing, and details have not been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, the case will be reopened, and surviving suspects will face trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicole Peets. Nicole Peets was born on February 26, 1973, in King County, Washington. Her parents, who later divorced while Nicole was still in school, had her as their only child together. During her high school years, Nicole was a lively and sociable individual who participated in sports and had a charming personality. She had many friends and enjoyed trips to the countryside, with Lake Sammamish, located east of Seattle, being her favorite vacation spot. She spent her summer vacations there every year. After high school, Nicole attended Western Washington College, where she studied public relations. Alongside her studies, she continued to engage in sports and maintained an excellent physical shape. She decided to turn her passion for sports into a career and landed a job as a trainer at a local sports club. There, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and gained a loyal client base who regularly attended her group classes. At the same time, Nicole pursued higher education in management and eventually secured a job at a major mobile communications company. Outwardly, Nicole appeared to be a friendly and sociable person who was always willing to help others. However, few people realized that she was hiding a great deal of pain and misery behind this facade. As a teenager, Nicole struggled with addiction after her parents got divorced. This event was traumatic for her fragile and still developing psyche, leading her to rebel and seek solace in bad company and alcohol. Unfortunately, this led to a severe addiction that lasted for several years and had a devastating impact on Nicole's physical and mental health. Her mother, Gail, was often away from home due to her demanding job as a flight attendant and didn't notice the warning signs. Nicole lived with her elderly grandmother, who also didn't initially realize that her granddaughter was regularly consuming alcohol. By the time the truth came to light, the damage had already been done. Fortunately, Nicole's mother was there to support her. Gail not only arranged for Nicole to receive therapy but also attended AA meetings with her, helping her to open up and overcome her addiction. By that time, Gail had remarried, and her new partner, Rod, was very supportive of Nicole. He treated her like his own daughter and believed she could overcome her addiction. Nicole took therapy seriously, attending every session, and soon overcame her addiction. However, the effects of alcohol on her health were significant. Nicole developed severe pancreas problems, requiring surgery. More devastatingly, her early alcohol abuse damaged her reproductive system, rendering her unable to have children. After overcoming her addiction in the mid-1990s, Nicole met her future husband, David, at her new job at a sports club. David, a regular at the club, was a tall, handsome young man who was diligent about his fitness routine. He was immediately drawn to Nicole, and she, too, noticed the attractive young man and became interested. Although David was 4 years younger than Nicole, the age difference did not bother them. The relationship between Nicole and David gradually developed into a romantic one, which lasted almost 8 years before they got married in 2002. Their intimate wedding ceremony in Hawaii was attended only by their closest friends and family. After exchanging their vows, they moved to a quiet town called Linwood in Washington State, where they bought a home and began their new life together. Nicole was known for being sociable, friendly, and had a talent for building relationships. She quickly formed close bonds with the neighbors and had a passion for animals, with multiple dogs being part of the family. Because unable to have children of her own, she directed her maternal instincts towards her pets. David and Nicole were viewed as the epitome of a happy married couple, with a seemingly perfect relationship that brought them joy. One of Nicole's many hobbies was cooking, and she excelled at it. She delighted her husband and impressed guests with her culinary skills, taking pleasure in sharing meals and company with those she loved. Tragedy struck when Nicole disappeared on the eve of her 33rd birthday in 2006. Nicole failed to report to work and was unreachable by her family throughout the day. Her mother, Gail, tried to contact her but was unsuccessful, prompting her to alert David, Nicole's husband, to see if he knew what was going on. However, David had also been unable to reach Nicole. When questioned, David revealed that he and Nicole had argued the previous day, and when she didn't answer her phone the next day, he assumed she was still upset. He waited until evening to attempt to apologize, only to realize Nicole was still missing. It wasn't until the evening of the second day, when Nicole still hadn't contacted her family and her phone was still unreachable, that the police decided to launch a search. They began by investigating the last known location where Nicole was seen, her home with David. An investigation of the room where Nicole Peets was last seen found no signs of evidence of kidnapping. The absence of her personal car suggested that she might have simply left on her own. The family turned to social media to spread the word and ask for help in finding their daughter. They also immediately flew to Linwood, where they started their own search efforts. They put up posters with her picture and spoke to people who knew her, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The police searched for Nicole and her car, trying to determine the route she took on the day she disappeared. Tragically, the worst fears were confirmed a few days later when a jogger discovered a young woman's body in a local park area. The jogger had taken an unusual route that morning. It was there that he stumbled upon something suspicious in the shrubbery, which turned out to be a brutally mutilated, naked body. The police were immediately notified, and forensic experts suggested that the crime was violent due to the presence of severe blunt force trauma and the lack of clothing. The autopsy revealed extensive bruising, abrasions, and blunt force injuries, indicating that the victim had been severely beaten before her death. The cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, and it appeared that the killer had used their bare hands. Police initially believed the body they found was that of Nicole Peets, a young woman who had gone missing several days earlier and had been the subject of a citywide search. Her identity was confirmed by her family as Nicole. When Nicole's mother, Gail, saw her daughter's body at the morgue, she was overcome with grief and needed medical attention. Her husband, Rod, was also devastated, but his reaction seemed a bit unusual to some. He didn't seem truly distraught and his emotions seemed forced. However, at that time no one paid much attention to this, because everyone coped with the tragedy in their own way. Police believed the missing car was the primary target of the attack and would hold key evidence. They released a description of the gray Volkswagen Polo to the media, asking for tips. Weeks later, a security guard found the car in a parking lot on the outskirts of the city, noticing it had been parked there for an extended period. The police took the car for a thorough examination, hoping to find evidence and clues that would lead them to the perpetrator and help reconstruct the crime scene. However, their search yielded nothing. The only fingerprints and DNA found in the car belonged to Nicole and her husband, who occasionally drove the vehicle. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the investigators were reluctant to return the car to David. In addition, the victim's lack of clothes raised questions. The numerous injuries suggested a rage-driven attack, possibly a personal vendetta. However, Nicole was known for her kind nature and had no known enemies. The investigation into this complex case was on the verge of going cold, with no new leads or directions to pursue after nearly a year. The lack of witnesses and surveillance cameras in the parking lot where the car was abandoned made it difficult to gather evidence. However, one peculiar detail stood out. The driver's seat was positioned in a way that suggested the person driving the car was significantly taller and larger than the victim. The police obtained footage from the gas station security cameras, but the contents remained unclear. Frustrated by the lack of progress and the fact that the killer was still at large, Nicole's parents took matters into their own hands. They hired a private investigator to gather information and verify their suspicions, and offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could provide useful information about the case. David, the husband of the victim, initially showed interest in the investigation, but his enthusiasm waned after 6 months. He eventually remarried, having a child with his new wife. This news was devastating for Gail, the victim's mother, as her daughter had been unable to have children, and David had often criticized her for this. Gail repeatedly suggested that David might be the culprit, but many people believed Gail was motivated by resentment. The police seemed to dismiss this theory altogether. However, 6 years after the crime, David was taken into custody as the prime suspect. One unusual circumstance was a gas station security footage that captured a man using Nicole credit card. The footage appeared to show a man resembling David, but he wore a head covering and dark glasses, making a positive identification impossible. Although this recording was not definitive proof, it was still added to the case file. Another discrepancy was the missing wedding ring, which Nicole never removed from her finger. Initially, investigators believed the killer might have taken it, but they found the ring in a box on the dressing table in Nicole's home. During the examination of Nicole's body, experts found a dental mouth guard in her mouth. This device was specifically designed to prevent teeth grinding, a condition known as bruxism, which Nicole experienced during sleep. The mouth guard had been prescribed to her shortly before her death due to her nervousness, which caused involuntary muscle spasms in her jaw. These spasms had led to the erosion of her tooth enamel and chipping of her teeth. The investigation concluded that Nicole was likely killed in her own bed while she was still asleep. This theory was supported by the fact that she was not wearing any clothes and her body was clean, with no signs of a struggle. Additionally, Nicole's face was free of makeup. The mouth guard found at the scene was not a significant factor, as Nicole had only recently started using it. Moreover, forensic experts analyzed the driver's seat in the car and found that the last person to sit behind the wheel had the same physical characteristics as David, Nicole's husband. The car only had fingerprints belonging to David and Nicole, suggesting that no one else had been in the vehicle. A crucial discovery was made possible by advances in technology. The killer had attempted to mislead the investigation by using Nicole's phone in various parts of the city. However, at the same locations and times, David's phone was also active, revealing a suspicious coincidence. Furthermore, it was discovered that David had a motive for the crime, and the seemingly perfect family was actually facing a severe crisis. Nicole was juggling multiple responsibilities, studying, working 2 jobs, and supporting others struggling with addiction. Meanwhile, her husband led a carefree life, unable to hold down a job and spending most of his time in bars and clubs. He would often use Nicole's earnings to fund his nightlife, including affairs with other women. Nicole tried to intervene in her husband's addiction, suggesting AA meetings, but he dismissed her concerns. The situation worsened as David's infidelity was revealed. After Nicole's sudden and mysterious death, David hastily filed for a large insurance payout and began a new relationship. It was later discovered that David had been having an affair with a woman named Jane for several months prior to Nicole's death. While Nicole was working or studying, David would often meet Jane at bars and clubs. Just before Nicole's birthday, David brought Jane to their home, where Nicole unexpectedly walked in on them. This led to a heated argument between Nicole and David. Nicole confided in her mother about the incident just days before she mysteriously vanished. Gail had her suspicions about her son-in-law from the start, but the police claimed they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. As a result, the case was closed, and the family was left in the dark about the investigation. Over time, they lost hope that the person responsible would be held accountable. After his wife's death, David received a significant insurance payout, which he spent on lavish gifts for his mistress, Jane. Gail believed that Jane might have been involved in the crime, but she was only questioned as a witness due to lack of evidence. In 2013, David went to court, still denying any involvement in his wife's death. His lawyers initially argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial and not conclusive. However, as the prosecution presented more incriminating evidence, the defense shifted their strategy. They portrayed David as a victim, suggesting that his wife, Nicole, had become unbearable to live with due to her addiction to pain pills and drinking. The claims that Nicole was unstable were unfounded and disputed by everyone who knew her. Even if she had lost control, that would not have justified David's brutal murder of his wife. Ultimately, David's guilt was proven beyond a doubt, and he received the maximum sentence allowed by state law. David was sentenced to 18 years in prison, but he will be eligible for parole in 2025 after serving 2/3 of his sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Courtney Holden. The Holden family, a typical American household in Spokane. Judy and John Holden, who had 2 grown daughters living independently, also had an adopted son, Joshua, who still lived with them. Joshua, a quiet and introverted young man, had not yet started his own family and remained at home. The Holden's family approach to childcare was unconventional. The family saw fostering as a way to earn a steady income through government benefits. Judy's background and experience as a mother earned the authorities as trust. 4-year-old Courtney Holden, born on February 28, 1992, had been living in a shelter for 2 years when her life took a dramatic turn. In 1996, Courtney moved to Spokane to join the Holden family, comprised of Joshua and several other foster children. The little girl's heart was filled with hope for a loving and caring family. However, her dreams were short-lived. From a young age, Courtney was forced to bear the burden of excessive household chores. She was responsible for cleaning the entire house and washing dishes for every meal. If she made even the slightest mistake, she faced punishment. Life in the Holden home quickly became a nightmare, surpassing the hardships she experienced in the house. What was surprising was that the Holdens treated the other foster children with kindness, but they showed inexplicable hatred towards Courtney. Judy Holden was already an adult when Courtney joined the family, and Courtney was the last child they took from the orphanage. This might be the reason for their unusual behavior towards her. Courtney was subjected to strict rules, including being forbidden from going outside without permission. Visitors to the Holden home often witnessed Judy and Joshua mistreating Courtney, calling her Cinderella in a derogatory manner. Courtney found herself in a difficult situation, but she was a resilient girl who adapted to the harsh conditions over time. She learned to fear her foster mother and was terrified of her brother Joshua, who prohibited her from socializing with friends and peers. She was not allowed to have a mobile phone or other modern conveniences, and she only left the house when necessary and with permission. The only times she enjoyed some freedom were when the house was empty and she could step out into the backyard or chat with neighbors. As she grew into an adult, Courtney became accustomed to her life and learned to treat her foster parents with respect, despite their mistreatment. She did not become bitter, as she had no concept of a normal family life to compare hers to. Courtney's life improved significantly when her brother Joshua moved out of the house due to disagreements with their parents. This newfound freedom allowed her to come and go as she pleased, spend time with friends, and enjoy activities she had previously been restricted from. As a result, Courtney finally felt happy. As time passed, Courtney graduated from school and met a man named Michael, with whom she fell deeply in love. Michael treated her with kindness and care, a stark contrast to her previous experiences. Their relationship flourished, and they welcomed a son together in 2011. However, things took a surprising turn when Michael asked Courtney to move in with him and start a life together as a family. Despite his requests, Courtney chose to remain in her parents' house and ended her romantic relationship with Michael. By this time, the Holden house had become empty, as the foster children had grown up and moved out. Courtney's foster father, John Holden, had passed away, leaving her to live with her foster mother, Judy, and her child. Michael was allowed to visit his son, but only with Judy's permission. During Joshua's absence, Courtney's life with her son was relatively peaceful. However, after their father's death in 2014, Joshua returned and began to harass the family. He installed numerous surveillance cameras around the house, posting signs that read, "Smile, you're on camera." The cameras made Courtney anxious, as she knew that leaving the house would likely result in trouble from Joshua. Courtney's life took a turn for the worse around 2015. She confided in a neighbor that Joshua had taken away her freedom, forbidding her from having a phone, using social media, talking to outsiders, driving, or leaving the house without his permission. He also forced her to cut ties with Michael after the child's birth. Despite this, Courtney remained silent and compliant. Neighbors noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms and asked her about them. She openly admitted that Joshua was physically abusing her. The neighbors were concerned and tried to help her, even contacting the police. However, the Holdens were able to dismiss the cases because Courtney never publicly acknowledged the abuse. As time went on, Courtney was no longer allowed to talk to her neighbors, who only saw her outside in the evenings. She obeyed Joshua's rules without question. Those who knew Joshua described him as a large and intimidating man with a cruel and unpredictable nature. He was also known to be paranoid and prone to insults. Joshua had a history of violent behavior and had even boasted about being able to kill someone and dispose of their body with ease. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence and the victim's refusal to cooperate with the police. There were also suspicions that he had committed assault and misconduct against a woman in 2003, but he was never identified as the perpetrator. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and for burglary, leading to him leaving home for several years. The last message Courtney sent to a friend on Facebook, nearly 2 years ago, was a desperate cry for help. "I have to go. I must leave. Josh is coming." After that, her account went silent. Family acquaintances described the dynamics within the Holden household as strange and controlling. They were particularly puzzled by the fact that Courtney's child referred to Joshua's mother, Judy, as Mom and Joshua as Dad, while Courtney was referred to only by her first name. In August 2018, a heated argument escalated, prompting Courtney to try to leave, but Joshua, larger and stronger, physically restrained her and carried her back inside. It's the last time she was seen outside the household. It wasn't until nearly 2 years later, in October 2019, that concerns about Courtney's disappearance began to grow. Michael and his girlfriend, who had not seen Courtney in almost 2 years, started to worry about her whereabouts. He was eager to see his child, filed a missing person report with the police on October 24th, sparking an investigation into Courtney's disappearance. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and fled. However, they could not explain who was continuing to access her Social Security benefits and electronic food stamps. On the same day as the search, Joshua and Judy withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Center for Criminal Information, stating that she was safe and did not want to be searched for. However, the police discovered that she was actually one of Courtney's stepsisters. As the investigation continued, Joshua and Judy provided multiple conflicting accounts of Courtney's disappearance. They claimed that she had run away with a truck driver, and later, that she had left with a secret lover. The inconsistencies in their stories, combined with Courtney's unexplained absence, raised suspicions that the Holdens were hiding something. In October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden suddenly left Spokane, further arousing the suspicions of detectives investigating the disappearance of Courtney. The Holden's family flight from the area strengthened the detectives' conviction that they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. The investigation into Courtney's disappearance continued, and the Spokane Police Department attempted a welfare check in early October, which quickly escalated into a missing person case. The case was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser, who has spoken publicly about the investigation. The information gathered from police interviews and court records has shed light on the events surrounding Courtney's disappearance. When Lesser visited the house in early October, Judy told him that Courtney had been home just a few days prior. She claimed that Courtney had left on foot with her son. However, when Lesser asked for Judy's phone number, she became hostile and locked the door in his face. Later, Judy allowed police to enter the house to see Courtney's room, but she became very nervous. The house was extremely cluttered, with piles of items covering all available space on counters. Courtney's room was also cluttered, and the mattress was bare, giving the impression that no one had lived there recently. At one point, Judy panicked when she lost sight of one of the detectives behind a closed door and ordered the investigators to leave. When Lesser asked to search the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy refused. A neighbor reported seeing Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leaving in a van with a child. Detective Lesser found it suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. Her last prescription was in July 2018, although she had been receiving medications monthly before disappearing. Surveillance footage showed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. Cameras also captured they withdrawing money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing. By October 24th, Joshua and Judy had left their home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, they found that the DVR from the home surveillance system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were gone. Joshua and Judy's mobile numbers were deactivated in mid-November, but 2 new numbers with Texas area codes were activated on the same day. A month after the Holdens left, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They claimed they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy had retired. In mid-December, Joshua and Judy traveled to Texas, where they were eventually found by the police at Judy's daughter's house. Courtney's son was also present at the scene. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested and charged with identity theft, interfering with child custody, and using Courtney's bank accounts without her permission. Fortunately, the child was found safe and was reunited with his father. No other family members were charged with any crimes. The police searched Judy's home in Spokane with search dogs but did not find any signs of Courtney. They also searched a home in Texas and a vehicle in Oklahoma, but these searches did not yield any clues about Courtney's whereabouts. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, were held in a Texas jail, where they refused to speak with police and fought extradition to Spokane. The authorities awaited a governor's warrant to bring them back, but since there was insufficient evidence to link them to Courtney's disappearance, they were likely released. This case remains one of the most puzzling missing person cases, with little progress made during the month-long investigation. The police have extensive notes on the case, but Judy and Joshua maintain their innocence in Courtney's disappearance. The police, however, suspect that Courtney is likely deceased, but they lack concrete evidence to prove it. It's tragic that Courtney was drawn into the Holden family, who failed to provide her with the love and support she desperately sought. Despite their mistreatment, Courtney wanted to believe they were her family and struggled to defend herself against their cruelty. The cruel reality is that there are many ways to secretly dispose of a body using chemicals that can evade detection by experts and police dogs, leaving Courtney's fate a heartbreaking mystery. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vashti Seacat. Brad Seacat was born on March 3, 1976, in Kingman, Kansas, to Janet Seacat and her husband, whose identity and background remain undisclosed due to a previous marriage. Janet had a son, Robert, from a prior marriage, making Robert Brad's older half-brother. The Seacat family has a history of good law enforcement, leading to a strict and disciplined home environment. Although details about Brad's childhood are scarce, it is known that he attended high school in Kingman. Brad was physically strong and athletic, which led him to participate in high school wrestling and bodybuilding. His efforts paid off as he excelled in inter-school tournaments, often taking first place and gaining recognition as a star wrestler and prominent figure in his school. At 16, Brad met Vashti Seacat at a major wrestling competition at the Kansas City Coliseum. Vashti was born on March 21, 1977, in Argonne, Seward County, to Julie Hosteler and Clinton Forrest. She was the third of 4 children, with an older brother, Rich, and sister, Catherine, and a younger sister, Tyler. Vashti was a social person with many friends, but she struggled with feelings of inadequacy. However, this didn't hold her back from becoming a cheerleader for her school's wrestling team. She enjoyed watching the team win and attended every match, including the one where she met Brad. Brad was immediately smitten with Vashti and asked her out. Impressed by his confidence, she accepted, and they felt an instant connection at their first meeting. From that moment on, they were inseparable. After high school, Vashti attended a university, while he followed in his family's footsteps by enrolling in the police academy. As a result, they spent less time together, which caused Brad was starting to exhibit controlling and possessive behavior. Over time, Brad's growing jealousy became unbearable for Vashti, and she eventually ended the relationship. Although the breakup was not dramatic or traumatic, it marked the end of their romance. After graduating from the police academy, Brad joined the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County, a short distance from Kingman. Despite his professional accomplishments, he couldn't shake off the feeling of emptiness. He still had strong feelings for Vashti, and his love for her lingered deep within him. Brad didn't abandon his dream of reuniting with Vashti, and as soon as the chance presented itself, he visited her. His words struck a chord with Vashti, who sensed his sincerity, possibly due to his devotion to faith or genuine affection. This led her to decide to return to him. Overjoyed by her decision, Brad hastily approached Vashti's family to express his true intentions and request her hand in marriage. The Seacat family was thrilled to hear the news, convinced that their marriage would be a successful one. The wedding took place in 2004, after which Brad and Vashti settled in a neighborhood in Kingman. As they began building their new life, they befriended Monty Weldon, a friendly neighbor who frequently invited them to backyard barbecues. Brad's unpleasant behavior causing problems due to his controlling personality. However, when Vashti became pregnant, their issues appeared to fade away. In 2006, they welcomed their first son, Brandon, and 2 years later, their second son, Bronson. Although Brad was a loving father, he sometimes had a rough way of interacting with the children, especially during playtime. He treated the children like adults and occasionally showed a more aggressive side. Brad's behavior was concerning. He once beat a prisoner by hitting his head against a concrete wall, causing a fractured skull and brain damage. The prisoner later died from his injuries. Brad was sued for using excessive force, but his boss, Sheriff Gary Steve, supported him, and the charges were eventually dropped. The prosecutor's office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation dismissed the complaint, clearing Brad of any wrongdoing. Brad showed no remorse for his actions and even admitted to his colleagues that he liked to use violence, especially against individuals he considered bad people. On a separate occasion, Brad and another officer restrained a defendant who became unruly and resisted being removed from the courtroom for contempt of the judge. This incident earned them recognition, and the police chief awarded both officers bronze medals for their actions. On the other hand, Vashti wants to pursue her career despite her love for her children. She searched for a job and succeeded with her efforts. She became the new human resources director at Vito Communications Company. However, Brad seemed unhappy about her new role. He wants Vashti to focus only on family work and her children's education. As a result, he started complaining about Vashti spending too much time at the office. The number of arguments between Vashti and Brad increased significantly. Despite her best efforts to repair their marriage for the sake of their children, Vashti feels her efforts are in vain. She had a feeling that their situation would eventually end in disaster. To resolve the conflict, Vashti and Brad began attending sessions with social worker Connie Sodman. During her first sessions, Vashti expressed feelings of extreme loneliness and isolation, suggesting that couples therapy sessions might be their last hope to save their marriage. Every time Vashti mentioned the possibility of divorce, Brad became angry. For weeks, he repeatedly threatened to kill her if she left him, boasting that he could take her life without consequences because he was a police officer. He claimed he could make her murder look like a suicide, and even mentioned burning down their house to destroy the evidence. After the argument, Brad threatened her, saying that if Vashti pursued a divorce, he would prevent her from seeing their children, even taking them out of the country if necessary. At the same time, Brad left his police job and began working as a self-defense instructor at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Meanwhile, Vashti continued to attend therapy sessions and made positive changes in her life, such as exercising regularly and eating healthier. A few months later, Vashti's social life began to flourish. She makes new connections at work and meets someone she is attracted to. However, she confided in her sister about her new relationship out of fear that Brad might find out and take revenge. Vashti openly shared with her colleagues about the various threats she received from her husband. Unbeknownst to her, Brad discovered her personal diary and brought it to his office, where he scanned and printed out many pages. He then spends his days researching topics including suicide, fire injuries, and the difference between murder and suicide. In the first week of April 2011, Vashti had her final counseling session with Connie to prepare for her divorce from Brad. Together, they created a safety plan for Vashti and their children. When Brad received his divorce papers on April 29th, he overreacted. After discovering the papers, Brad finds a projector in the pantry and uses it to enlarge a handwritten note from Vashti's diary. At the same time, he also wrote a farewell message to his children. What's amazing is that he also printed out documents on how to disguise a murder as a suicide. Additionally, Brad asked the maintenance staff how to properly destroy computer hard drives, and he used a blowtorch to destroy them because they contained images that were unfavorable to him. Then he threw the rest in the trash. Later that day, Brad bought gas at a convenience store and put it in his truck. That evening, he asked Vashti if he could spend the night at home to say goodbye to his children and promised to leave the next morning. However, he also tries to persuade Vashti to reconsider the divorce and becomes increasingly threatening when she refuses to change her mind. Vashti and Brad had a disagreement that evening, which resulted in Vashti going to bed exhausted around 3:15 a.m. Meanwhile, Brad entered the bedroom with a gun and shot Vashti in the neck. A neighbor who was awake and watching TV thought she heard gunshots but felt it wasn't concerning enough. Brad then staged his suicide by placing the gun next to Vashti's body. He poured gasoline into the hallway and upstairs bedroom and took Vashti's phone to call himself, creating an alibi. After getting his children, Brendan and Bronson, to a safe location, Brad started a fire. The fire spread quickly, engulfing the main room and igniting the remaining cartridges in the gun. At 3:45 a.m., neighbors were startled awake by the fire. Shortly thereafter, at around 7 a.m., Brad called 911, reporting that his wife had taken her own life. When emergency responders arrived, the first floor of the house was on fire and Brad was waiting in the car with his children. A police officer asked if anyone was still in the house, and Brad said that only his wife was there. He fabricated a story that Vashti had shot herself out of depression, and before doing that, she asked him to take the children to a safe place. Brad claimed he tried to save Vashti but was unable to do so because of the intense smoke and fire. When firefighters finally extinguished the blaze, they discovered Vashti's body on the bed in the master bedroom. An important detail attracted the attention of investigators. A .44 caliber revolver was found below Vashti's body, the barrel pointed toward her feet, and a 5-gallon gasoline barrel lay middle of the bed. 2 days later, investigators found Vashti's diary in her car, which contained a handwritten note and a suicide note. Forensic examination revealed that Vashti died instantly from a gunshot wound to the head and also suffered gunshot wounds to the torso and thighs. However, blood and lung tests showed no signs of smoke or carbon monoxide inhalation, which is typically present in the body of a person killed in a fire. The extent of the burns on Vashti's body made it impossible to determine whether her death was a murder or suicide. Police discovered some inconsistencies in Brad's story. It is worth noting that there was no dirt, blood, or wound on his body. Additionally, the position of the gun with the barrel pointing downward raises suspicions that this was not a suicide. Special Agent David Fetty of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation questioned how the gun came to be under the body. He pointed out that if Vashti shot herself while lying down, the gun would fall to the floor. If she sat up, the gun would still be on the right side of the bed. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet does not support the theory that Vashti shot himself behind the right ear. David decides to investigate further when some details don't seem to add up. Police found documents explaining how to make a murder look like a suicide. While analyzing Vashti's diary entry, they noticed her handwriting did not match her other entries. Forensic scientist Dennis McFarr concluded that the note had been tampered with. Witnesses also reported seeing Brad destroy a computer hard drive the day before. A neighbor who heard the fatal gunshot testified that the incident occurred at 3:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Brad called 911. This information confirms David's suspicions that something is wrong. Police arrested Brad on May 13, 2011 and charged him with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 other counts related to putting his sons, Brendan and Bronson, in danger. During interrogation, Brad claimed that Vashti felt insecure and depressed because of their troubled marriage and his threats to take the children away. Brad also claimed that after filing for divorce, Vashti was overcome with depression and remorse, so she set a fire and shot herself. However, the police did not believe his story. The trial began on June 10, 2013. Deputy Attorney General Amy Haley shared her account of the events with the jury, emphasizing that no one was more aware than the police of the devastation of fire and its destructive ability to erase evidence. Regarding the projector, the defendant claimed that he only used this device for practical training to guide students. A forensic examiner testified about a forged letter and the destruction of a hard drive. The defendant claimed that he destroyed the hard drive to protect personal information, not to hide anything. The defendant's attorney, Roger Falk, argued that Vashti had suffered from depression since high school, a condition that had worsened after taking some kind of sedative. Brad's brother testified in court, corroborating his brother's account that Vashti had been depressed and sad for weeks before her death. In contrast, therapist Can reported that although Vashti was initially depressed due to marital circumstances, it was not a clinical mental health problem. The therapist said Vashti has been very worried about her future lately. Vashti's brother also recounting the emotional turmoil Vashti's children had endured as a result of their parents' circumstances. The prosecution portrayed Brad as a manipulative person who used his police powers to distort the truth. Yet the defense repeatedly argued that Vashti's death was a suicide and pointed out that even the medical examiner could not determine the cause of her death. Brad testified in his own defense, describing himself as a loving husband and devoted father who was saddened by his wife's desire for a divorce. Kingman County Judge Larry Solomon was accused by Brad that the judge had an incentive to rule against him to win a nomination to the Kansas Supreme Court. However, the jury ultimately found Brad guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Solomon sentenced Brad to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years and an additional 6 years for other crimes. Brad will not be eligible for parole until he has served more than 31 years. In handing down the sentence, the judge took into account Brad's not guilty plea, his dishonest attempt to avoid responsibility, and his lack of remorse. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school's softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding 2 lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene, where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found: a white Honda parked on the lake's shore, with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident, even to a non-expert: both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4 9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible, as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father, simultaneously an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrews sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrews' decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his co-workers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to find him and talk to him. Later that day, John was able to reach Andrew by phone. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son, Andrew, revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them, you're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself in to the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years, and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Monroe County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew, Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, 2013, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Rosanna, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Rosanna, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked the scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman, who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton, with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle with Vanessa. The news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her co-workers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Karina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m. when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m. when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colin Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts, from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature and often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, he did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022, to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, pleaded guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Aya Hashim. The Hashim family moved to the UK from Lebanon in November 2011, seeking a safer and more promising future. Aya's father, Ismail, wanted his children to have a good education and become valuable member of society. He applied for asylum for himself and his family, and after receiving a residence permit, they settled in Blackburn. Aya was a driven and ambitious young woman with big plans for her life. She was a law student at Salford University. Tragically, her parents' hopes for a better life were shattered when Aya was killed in a senseless act of violence. On May 17, 2020, Aya left her house to go to a nearby supermarket at around 3 p.m. However, she never returned home. About an hour later, Aya's father went out to look for her. Aya's mother searched online and discovered the news that a woman had been shot in their neighborhood. Soon after, Aya's parents received the devastating news that their daughter had been killed in the shooting. Aya was walking on King Street when a car drove by with multiple occupants. One of the individuals in the car fired 2 shots, one of which fatally hit Aya. 19-year-old Aya Hashim was fatally shot on King Street and died the same day despite medical efforts. The police do not think the incident was motivated by racism or religious hatred. Deputy Chief Terry Woods is seeking the public's help in gathering evidence. He asks anyone with dashcam footage or surveillance cameras to come forward if they have recordings of a green Toyota Avensis car or any suspicious activity. According to Deputy Chief Woods, Aya was an innocent bystander who was shopping for her family when she was accidentally caught in the crossfire. The shooting involved a green Toyota Avensis car. Witnesses report that 2 rounds were fired from the vehicle, and sadly, Aya was hit. Later that day, police discovered the Toyota Avensis car involved in the shooting abandoned near the scene of the crime. They also obtained CCTV footage of the incident. The footage shows that at 3:03 p.m. Aya is walking along the sidewalk. The Toyota mentioned earlier drives past her. The rear side window on the left is down. The shooter makes a fatal shot. The bullet goes through her and hits the pole. For ethical reasons, the police did not reveal footage of she falling to the ground. After reviewing the video recording, it's clear that there were at least 2 individuals in the car, the driver and the shooter. Following the shooting, the perpetrators quickly fled the scene and abandoned the vehicle on a nearby street. Within 2 hours, the police located the car and initiated a search for its owner. Aya Hashim was caught in the crossfire of a shooting incident that occurred near Khan's car wash. Following her death, the police launched a massive operation to apprehend the suspects, who had fled the UK, with the assistance of international law enforcement. 8 individuals were initially charged in connection with her death. Aya's death was ultimately determined to be a tragic accident. She was an innocent bystander. The shooting was actually a targeted attack on the owner of Khan's car wash, who was a competitor of Pharaoh Suleiman. It was Suleiman who allegedly hired a hitman to take out Khan, but the bullet mistakenly hit Aya instead. According to the video recording, at the time of the incident, Aya was standing a few feet away from a pole. The first bullet fired missed its intended target and hit something near a man, as evidenced by the splashing water. The key point here is that the shooter made a mistake. The person they aimed at was not the business owner, but rather an employee who was mistaken for Khan. During the second shot, Aya was positioned between the shooter and the employee. The bullet struck her in the left side of her chest, passed through her body, and then hit the pole. The car immediately fled the scene. The car wash owner, Khan, witnessed Aya falling to the ground and rushed to her aid, calling emergency services in the process. He described the events, stating that he had seen the car and the gun, and then the assailant sped away. According to him, they returned and started shooting, aiming the gun at him, which left him confused. To better understand the crime, let's examine the roles of the individuals involved. We'll start with the mastermind, Pharaoh Suleiman. Pharaoh Suleiman was a successful businessman with a loving family. Suleiman owned a thriving tire shop that had gained significant popularity over time. The business provided him with a substantial income, enabling him and his family to live a comfortable life. He was also active on social media, frequently sharing photos of himself driving expensive cars, giving his followers a glimpse into his life. When his business began to decline, he devised a plan to eliminate his competitor, Khan. Despite being a potential suspect due to his motive, Suleiman went ahead with the plan. He enlisted the help of Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. The perpetrators conducted a surveillance mission the day before the crime, driving near the car wash to inspect the area. Additionally, Abu Bakr Saisha purchased the Toyota used in the crime with money provided by Suleiman. Kashif Manzoor ensured the car was in working condition by performing technical checks and addressing any malfunctions. Uthman Saisha and his girlfriend, Judy Chapman, played a supporting role in the crime. They drove the shooter and driver to the location of the Toyota in their Ford Fiesta and then picked them up after the crime was committed, they abandoning the Toyota on a nearby street. According to the inquest, at 1:14 p.m., Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha picked up Raja and Ennis from Bolton and drove them 13 miles to Blackburn, where the Toyota was parked. Kashif Manzoor made sure the Toyota was ready as all four men drove to Blackburn. However, when they stopped a couple of miles from the car wash, the Toyota wouldn't start due to a dead battery. Manzoor jumped the battery using another car's battery and some wires. With the car started, Manzoor handed it over to Raja and Ennis, then returned to the service station where Suleiman was waiting, watching from a front row seat to see what would happen. The Toyota approached the corner with its windows rolled down. Ennis and Raja circled the block several times, waiting for the perfect moment to act. They needed to be on the same side of the street as Khan's car wash. Meanwhile, Manzoor and Suleiman were observing the situation unfold. On the fourth pass by the car wash, the Toyota slowed down. Coincidentally, Khan was on the street at that exact moment. However, the shooter, Zamir Raja, made a mistake and fired the first shot at a different employee, not Khan. Fortunately, the first bullet missed its target. But the second bullet hit Aya. Following the shooting, Raja and Ennis fled the scene, abandoning their vehicle and getting into a car with Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha, who drove them away from Blackburn. When police reviewed the video of Suleiman's store, Ayaz Hussein entered the store. Suleiman signaled to the others who were aware of the incident to leave the room and go to the second floor. Abu Bakr Saisha, who had bought the Toyota involved in the crime, was sitting behind them. When Abu Bakr Saisha overheard the police radio mention that the perpetrator's car had been found, he immediately got up to discuss something with Suleiman. 9 days after Aya's murder, Zamir Raja, the shooter, fled to Portugal and met Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota, at Lisbon Airport. Both men had escaped the country. Meanwhile, the police were arresting the individuals involved in the crime. Pharaoh Suleiman, the mastermind, was arrested on May 18, the day after Aya's murder. Abu Bakr Saisha was arrested on May 19, and Judy Chapman and Uthman Sada were arrested on May 20th. Ayaz Hussain and Kashif Manzoor were arrested on May 21st. Zamir Raja, who had hoped to return to England without being detected, was arrested at a London train station on June 6. Anthony Ennis was caught in Spain on July 4th and extradited to the UK. Aya Hashim was murdered and Khan, the owner of a car wash, was nearly killed in a violent crime. Several suspects were charged, and at first, all of them denied any involvement. However, as the investigation continued and the pressure mounted, their stories began to contradict each other as they tried to downplay their roles in the crime. As the suspects' testimonies became more inconsistent, they started to turn on each other, revealing crucial details about the crime to the police. Each suspect tried to avoid a long prison sentence by blaming the others. On August 5, 2021, the court delivered its verdicts, resulting in severe sentences for all those involved. Pharaoh Solon, who had a prior conviction for a fatal hit-and-run incident in 2001, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. Raja, the shooter, was also given a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. According to reports, he was paid $500 for his involvement in the crime. The driver, Anthony Ennis, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Ayaz Hussain, who orchestrated the crime, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Abu Bakr Saisha, who bought the getaway car, will serve at least 28 years. Uthman Satatya, who arranged for the shooter and driver to be transported, will also serve at least 28 years, and Kashif Manzoor, who made sure the car was working on the day of the crime, will serve at least 27 years. The judge was critical of the defendants, stating that they showed no regret for their actions after the shooting. Instead of taking responsibility, they tried to deceive and manipulate their way out of trouble. When that failed, they turned on each other in an attempt to save themselves. Judy Chapman was found guilty in October 2021 of involuntary deprivation of life. She was given a 15-year prison sentence for driving the car involved in the crime. However, investigators have since discovered that other individuals were involved in the crime. This was revealed through analysis of communication between the convicted parties. Louis Otway, a 42-year-old from Manchester, was sentenced to life in prison on May 5, 2023, with a minimum term of 32 years. During his trial, evidence revealed that Otway acted as an intermediary between Ayaz Hussain, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. Specifically, he assisted Hussain in committing a crime. Another person, Banbridge, was also involved in the case. She was the 10th person to be found guilty. Prosecutors said that Banbridge met with Raja and Ennis in Bolton, took their phones, and turned them off. Then, she drove to Trafford and turned the phones back on in different locations, making it seem like Raja and Ennis were in Greater Manchester, not Blackburn, when a shooting happened. This was done to create a fake alibi for the two men. Banbridge, 32, admitted to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and was sentenced to 23 months in prison on August 11, 2023. This was the last conviction in the case of Aya Hashim. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hawood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a centre forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, A young man from Yarm attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town, and The Keys is a popular spot on the high street where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at The Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside The Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park, eager to contribute to the search. Despite many not knowing Luke personally, the overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community's spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamad Asif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, a person can be charged with a fray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when 2 or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Miss Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Miss Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to a fracas. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamada Sif, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley, a 24-year-old student, went missing after a night out with friends at a nightclub on April 11th. Born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, Karen was the youngest child and only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up, Karen was known for her kind and caring nature, always willing to lend a helping hand. This trait greatly influenced her career choices. After graduating from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, Karen pursued a degree in nursing at the University of Limerick. Her interest in occupational therapy eventually led her to Glasgow, where she enrolled in a master's program at Caledonian University. Karen arrived in Glasgow in January 2015 and moved into an apartment with 3 other female students who were also new to the area. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates went to a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their apartment. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At about 1 a.m., Karen told her friend she was going to the restroom and would return soon. She took her purse and left her jacket on the table where the group was sitting. Her friends continued to enjoy themselves while Karen was away. After a while, they realized Karen had been gone longer than expected and should have returned by then. However, Karen was nowhere to be found. One of her friends searched the club for her but couldn't locate her. Trying to contact her by phone was also unsuccessful. She came with thought maybe Karen had gone home, but it was strange that Karen didn't tell anyone and left her jacket behind. The only explanation they could think of was that Karen might have met someone at the club and left with that person. With this thought in mind, they went to bed. However, when they woke up around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she had not returned home. They called and messaged Karen on social media, but she didn't respond. Although they had only known Karen for a few months, they knew that this behavior was out of character for her. Instead of coming up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves, they decided to report her disappearance to the police and inform the Buckley family about what had happened. The Scottish police acted swiftly to find Karen, and her disappearance was publicized in the media. Her parents urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed footage from the club's cameras and found evidence of Karen interacting with a mystery man. Within 36 hours, on April 13th, the man was identified as 21-year-old Alexander Pacto and was brought in for questioning. He confirmed that he had met Karen at the club and they had gone to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, about 3 kilometers away. Alexander also revealed that they had been intimate. Around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment and head home, despite his invitation to stay until morning. Alexander mentioned that during their intimate encounter, Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed corner, resulting in an injury and leaving blood marks on the sheets. The police reacted ambivalently to this information. While Alexander seemed genuinely open, he also appeared to be anticipating and justifying potential evidence that might be discovered in his apartment. On April 13th, a man reported finding a woman's purse to the police. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the purse was discovered in the park near Alexander's residence, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and identification documents. This new evidence lent credibility to Alexander's account of events, suggesting that something might have happened to Karen after she left his apartment. The search for Karen persisted, with hundreds of police officers thoroughly searching parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings for any potential clues that could aid in the investigation. At that point, Alexander Pacto was the primary suspect, being the last person to have seen Karen. However, investigators kept his identity confidential and did not disclose any information about him. 2 days after Karen went missing, police entering Alexander's apartment with a search warrant, police were immediately struck by the strong smell of bleach. They also observed that the mattress on the bed was the wrong size. Small, dark red spots were discovered on the bed and in the bathroom, and samples were taken for analysis. Additionally, a toolbox and a large quantity of cleaning supplies were found in the apartment. A police dog trained to detect human remains indicated a potential find near Alexander Pacto's car. While awaiting a search warrant, detectives discovered that Alexander had taken his car to be cleaned the previous day, but the job appeared to have been done poorly. Upon searching the vehicle, investigators found small, dark red spots on the inside of the passenger door and sent samples to the lab for analysis. As the investigation progressed, suspicions mounted that Karen might not be alive, but the search for her continued unabated. After journalists uncovered the suspect's identity, a photo of Alexander Pacto appeared on the front page of a local newspaper the following day. This unexpected move by the press ultimately proved helpful to the investigation. A man recognized Alexander's photo in the newspaper and contacted the police, offering valuable information. He claimed to have worked with Alexander in the past and revealed that Alexander rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow. This farm was approximately 9 kilometers from Alexander's apartment. The police pursued every lead and investigated this new information. The farm owner verified that Alexander indeed rented a storage space from him for £10 a week. Upon inspection of the storage space, the police discovered a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly corrosive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic materials. They also found a bonfire with remnants of a mattress that Pacto had attempted to burn. On the same day, April 15th, the suspect in Karen Buckley's case was arrested. Faced with substantial evidence, Alexander admitted to taking Karen's life, but claimed it was in self-defense. Police reconstructed a timeline of events based on evidence and Alexander testimony. On the night of April 11th to 12th, Karen left the club around 1 a.m. The reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument, stating Karen said she was going to the bathroom and would return. It is also unclear why Karen left her jacket behind, even if she had decided to go home. Officers investigating the case reviewed 1,900 hours of surveillance footage. One recording showed Karen encountering Alexander after leaving a club. They walked together towards his car, where it's believed he offered to drive her home. However, once inside the car, Alexander attacked Karen. He struck her 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death. Investigators found dark red stains in the car, bathroom, and on Alexander's bed, later confirmed as Karen's dried blood. After disposing of her body, Alexander planned his next moves, starting with getting rid of Karen's purse, which was later recovered and given to the police. Around 2 a.m., he returned home and did something that shocked the detectives. He took the Karen out of the car and carried it into his apartment. Later, at 8 a.m., he used his phone to search online for information about caustic soda. He then visited a shopping center where he purchased 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator mask, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. To get rid of Karen's body, Alexander realized 6 liters of caustic soda wouldn't be enough. He bought more from another store on his way home and put the body in the bathtub. However, since his neighbor would return home around 8 p.m. and he wouldn't have enough time, he wrapped the body in a blanket and hid it in his bedroom. The next day, April 13th, Alexander threw a wrench into the River Clyde, later found by divers. He then visited a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles away, where he sought a consultant's advice on a product that could remove bloodstains from a mattress. He also purchased 2 padlocks that day. He took Karen's belongings to a farm and burned them. Then, he bought a barrel and took it to a rented warehouse. There, he poured in caustic soda and locked the gate with 2 new padlocks. Later that day, at 6 p.m., police visited his home and took him in for questioning. Alexander confessed to his crime, but his motive was unclear. He claimed he killed Karen in self-defense during a car argument, but investigators did not believe him. They thought he was trying to justify his actions. Police suspected that Alexander killed Karen to cover up another crime and then got rid of her body. However, the body was too decomposed to determine if Karen had suffered violence before dying. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Through his lawyer, he apologized to Karen's family and expressed remorse. Alexander told his lawyer that he was too drunk on the night of the incident to remember why he killed Karen. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have been eligible for parole in 25 years instead of 23. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natasha Cournoyer. Natasha Cournoyer, 37 years old, has gone missing suddenly and without any notice. She didn't visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day went on, it became clear that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her worried relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by her vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Co-workers reported that Natasha was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She seemed to be in a good mood, friendly, and untroubled, with no signs of anything amiss. On October 2, Natasha needed a day off to deal with issues related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for time, she worked longer hours on October 1 and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and canine units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial in finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police weren't notified until the evening of October 2, 21 hours after she left work. The search for Natasha took place from October 3 to 5, but unfortunately, no leads were found. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe release. Meanwhile, the police were investigating their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been rocky, with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. They reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car headlights turned on and the car started moving, but instead of heading towards the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. It was determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the video was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's car. Based on the video footage, the police concluded that Natasha Conoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the 5th day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted from finding a missing person to investigating a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Point Aux Trumbull area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was located next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further disturbed by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha's cause of death was strangulation. Additionally, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating that she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also found inside her body, which would serve as a source of DNA evidence. While awaiting DNA analysis results, detectives attempted to identify the owner of a minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, there were 2 motels near Natasha's workplace. On October 16, 2009, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels to review guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had registered a Ford Windstar. The guest was 48 years old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl. She managed to escape and run to a neighbor's house. Claude's 40-month sentence for the attempted kidnapping of a child raises questions about the severity of his punishment. In November 2008, Claude was released and started working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and they all lived together in a house about a 10-minute drive from where Natasha Conoyer disappeared. Detectives found out Claude checked into a motel the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the motel room and discovered dark red stains on the carpet, which they sent for analysis. The same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, the police already had his DNA on file. However, they needed time to compare it to the DNA found on Natasha's body. Claude claimed he didn't know Natasha but admitted to frequently visiting the Lido Motel because it was cheap. He told the detectives he was unhappy with his intimate life with his wife and often rented a motel room to meet women offering paid sex services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude said he couldn't remember anything, including staying at the Lido Motel. He attributed his memory loss to excessive substance use, but his memory partially returned soon after. On November 5, 2009, a month after the body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. This time, however, it was not for a conversation. DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Conoyer's body matched LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was detected in the motel room Claude rented and inside his car. Montreal police say there's no link between the crime and Conoyer's job at Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim didn't know the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau stated that citizens could now feel safer in public. The news of the arrest shocked Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. The next day, on November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Conoyer's case. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with substantial evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed her death was accidental and not intentional. During his 2011 trial, 2 differing accounts of the events emerged, one from Claude and his defense team, and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he was waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle, and shut the door. Afterwards, Claude conversed with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to accompany him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, which left him unable to recall why he stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what he did during that time. However, he conveniently remembered specific moments that worked in his favor. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she fulfilled his requests, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, attacked Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the substances he had taken wore off, he realized the gravity of his actions. Claude chose to get rid of Natasha's body. As he drove to the location where the body was later found, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out the car window. However, it's crucial to remember that this account comes from LaRouche himself, and the more he shared, the more inconsistencies and questions emerged about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the scene and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would freeze. He revisited the body again the next day to retrieve the blanket, worried that it would hinder her discovery. LaRouche's statements suggest that his actions were influenced by a clouded consciousness, leading to illogical decisions. He claimed he did not intend to take Natasha's life, which he attempted to convey to those present during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and a witness testimony. The witness stated that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he saw Claude attempt to attack a jogger around 7 p.m. However, Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Conoyer was attacked an hour later. The prosecutor was convinced that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was found guilty and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that just 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. However, she managed to fend him off by biting his finger. As a result, Claude was deemed a dangerous offender under Canadian law, rendering his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing his chances of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with aspirations and objectives, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a history of serious crimes. Despite his past, Claude was allowed to roam free, living among the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he was able to reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to grapple with these unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today.